It was nearly midnight when Malik Johnson stepped out of the janitor's closet and into the marble-floored hallway of Harvard's Jefferson Laboratory. The echoes of his sneakers on the polished floor were the only sounds breaking the silence. The building was supposed to be empty. Silent. Locked. But one door, just one, hadn't shut all the way. Like it was waiting for him. His heart beat faster as he glanced behind to make sure his mother was still down the hall, cleaning the faculty lounge. She had no idea he'd slipped away. Again. Her words from earlier that night still rang in his ears, "Malik, don't touch nothin' and stay out of sight. This ain't our world." But he couldn't help it. The halls of Harvard whispered to him like ancient cathedrals whisper to the devout. To Malik, this wasn't just a campus. It was a temple. He slipped through the heavy door of Lecture Hall 1, the biggest in the building. It was cavernous, rows of tiered seating climbing like stadium steps. A single beam of moonlight sliced through the tall windows, landing on the chalkboard at the front of the room. And there it was. A question. It wasn't written like the stuff he saw in his public school math classes. There were symbols he couldn't name, squiggly integrals, Greek letters dancing around strange arrows. But he recognized the structure. It was a problem. A hard one. The kind that makes smart men rub their foreheads and stay up all night. He didn't know what the whole thing meant. But something about it felt right. Familiar. Like a song he'd heard once in a dream. Malik picked up a piece of chalk. They say curiosity killed the cat. But they never say what happened after. He wasn't supposed to be here. A black kid from Dorchester, in beat-up Converse and a thrifted hoodie, didn't just walk into Harvard like he belonged. Especially not through a janitor's hallway. Especially not to solve equations written by tenured professors. But here he was. And the numbers didn't care about who he was or where he came from. They just were. And so was he. He started writing. 5 minutes later, the overhead lights snapped on. Malik froze. The chalk clattered from his hand and rolled to a stop near his foot. He turned slowly to see a tall man in a gray blazer, holding a coffee cup and a bag of takeout. Professor Nathaniel Brooks, chair of theoretical physics, stood there in stunned silence. Brooks didn't say a word at first. His eyes flicked from the chalkboard to the kid standing in front of it. "Who are you?" he asked, voice sharp but curious. Malik hesitated. "Nobody. I'm with my mom. She cleans here. I was just." "You were just doing graduate-level tensor field mathematics on a board in a locked hall," Brooks interrupted, stepping forward, eyes narrowing. "Do you even know what you were writing?" Malik's throat was dry. He looked down at the half-solved equation. "Sort of," he said. "It's something about gravitational lensing, right? The energy curves space, and the light follows that curve." Professor Brooks stared at him, stunned. "How old are you?" 17. He squinted. "What school?" "Booker T. Washington High. South Dorchester." The professor blinked. Then scoffed. "Impossible." But Malik didn't flinch. "There was a mistake in the third term," he said quietly. "The coefficient for the curvature tensor. I think it should be a 4 instead of a 6. That's why the model breaks." Brooks looked at the board again. His jaw clenched. He stepped closer, tracing the boy's markings with his finger. He said nothing for a long time. Then, "Do you want to explain how a janitor's son just found a correction I missed 3 years ago?" Malik shrugged. "I like physics." The silence between them stretched long. Across the hallway, Vanessa Johnson wiped the last table in the lounge and looked at her watch. Malik hadn't come back. Her chest tightened. She wiped her hands on her pants and left the lounge, calling quietly, "Malik." No answer. She turned a corner and froze. There he was, inside the big lecture hall, with a professor. Her stomach dropped. Inside, Brooks had placed his food on the desk and was leaning against the front table, watching Malik. "Let me ask you something," he said. "If you could go anywhere in the world, if money, background, nothing mattered, what would you do?" Malik's eyes flicked to the board, then to the high arched ceiling above them. "I'd study," he said. "Here. Or MIT. Caltech, maybe." Professor Brooks smiled thinly. "That problem on the board? It's part of an open research question on dark matter interaction models. Nobody's solved it. And here you are, just doodling on a chalkboard." Malik flushed. "I wasn't trying to show off. I didn't say you were." "A beat." Brooks crossed his arms. "I'm going to give you a problem. 1 week. You solve it, and I'll see what I can do." Malik's eyes widened. "What kind of problem?" "The kind only someone who belongs here would even attempt." Just then, Vanessa burst in, eyes wide. "Malik! What did I tell you?" The moment broke. Malik turned to her, guilt washing over him. "Mama, I'm sorry. I just wanted to look." Brooks raised a hand. "Ma'am, your son has a gift." Vanessa looked between them, unsure what to say. Years of cleaning these halls, seeing the whiteboards, the awards, the gowns, she'd never imagined her son would be in this room like this. And yet, he was. Brooks handed her a card. "Call me," he said. "He has a mind that shouldn't be wasted." As they left the building that night, Malik glanced up at the glowing sign above the door, Harvard University, Department of Physics. For the first time, it didn't feel like just a dream. And for anyone watching at home, hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Because sometimes, one step through the wrong door can take you exactly where you're meant to be. Dorchester wasn't a place people came to chase dreams. It was the kind of neighborhood people fought to get out of, not into. And for 17 years, it had been Malik Johnson's whole world. On the surface, there wasn't much to look at: rows of low-rise brick apartments, corner bodegas with faded signs, chain-link fences half swallowed by ivy. The city buses hissed by, groaning under their own weight. The sidewalks cracked like tired skin. Police sirens were a soundtrack, not an interruption. But if you asked Malik, he could tell you the exact sound of Mrs. Alvarez's salsa music every Sunday morning. He could point out which sidewalk squares sparked when it rained, and which rooftops gave you the best view of the stars, if you dared climb that high. It wasn't just a place. It was his place. The Johnsons lived on the 5th floor of a building where the elevator hadn't worked in years. Each step up the stairwell came with the scent of bleach, damp socks, and someone's bad dinner choices. Inside apartment 5C, the floor creaked with memory. The walls were lined with old books from garage sales, their spines cracked and faded. The coffee table wobbled, the couch had springs that groaned like dying cats, and the TV was more static than screen. But it was home. Vanessa Johnson, Malik's mother, was already up before the sun, just like every day. Dressed in her janitor's uniform, navy blue, name tag faded from 100 washes, she packed her lunch with practiced hands. A bologna sandwich, a bag of chips, a water bottle filled from the tap. No complaints, no questions. Just routine. She moved like someone who had no time for self-pity. Her back ached, her knees popped when she knelt, and her hands had long ago lost their softness. But she smiled when she poured Malik cereal. "You're quiet this morning," she said, without looking at him. "I was just thinking," Malik replied, eyes still on the problem from last night, now scribbled across a dozen notebook pages. Vanessa caught the tone in his voice. The faraway one. The dreaming again voice. She sighed. "Baby, don't let that professor get in your head. I know how these people are. They talk nice one day, forget you the next. I know, Malik mumbled, not really believing it. I've worked that campus 15 years. I've seen geniuses come and go. They don't see us, Malik. They don't even look. I know, he said again. But part of him didn't want her to be right. Not this time. Malik's school, Booker T. Washington High, wasn't far, but it felt like a different universe from Harvard. The security guards checked backpacks at the entrance. The windows were lined with metal grates. Inside, the halls buzzed with noise, cursing, laughter, the occasional fist hitting a locker. Teachers battled more than taught. Desks were scarred with names and swear words carved in with keys or pens. But Malik knew how to disappear here. He kept his hood up, eyes down. He aced tests but never raised his hand. To most, he was just another quiet black kid who didn't get in trouble, didn't get involved. Invisible. And he liked it that way. Well, almost. There was one teacher who used to see him. Mr. Alvarez. 9th grade physics. Long hair, wild eyes, hands that moved like they were drawing equations in midair. He was the first person who ever told Malik he was brilliant. You think in dimensions most people don't even know exist, he once said after class, tapping the side of Malik's head. That year, Malik had come in every lunch period just to ask questions. They had argued over time dilation, wormholes, gravity wells. Mr. Alvarez treated him like a peer, not a kid. Not a project. But then one day, he was just gone. They said he got in trouble for going off curriculum. Rumor had it a parent complained because he was teaching too much theory, and not enough about standardized test prep. Malik never saw him again. He thought about Alvarez as he sat in class that morning, staring at the blackboard while a teacher droned on about cell division. His notebook was filled, but not with biology notes. He was rewriting last night's equation from memory, mapping every curve and constant. Why was the coefficient wrong? Why did the equation break down near the singularity? And what did that mean about how we understand space itself? His pencil danced while the world around him blurred. Mr. Johnson, his teacher snapped, breaking his trance. Maybe you'd care to explain what part of the cell does photosynthesis. He blinked. The chloroplast? She raised an eyebrow. Lucky guess. No, it wasn't. But whatever. After school, he didn't go straight home. He wandered instead, like he always did when his mind was buzzing too loud. He stopped at the old community library, a dying building nobody visited anymore. The Wi-Fi was slow, but it had what he needed, peace, and physics forums full of arguments from people with PhDs who'd never stepped foot in Dorchester. He didn't post, didn't comment. Just watched. Absorbed. Somewhere deep in a thread about tensor calculus, someone had posted the very same problem Malik saw last night. Under it, someone had written. Unsolved. Conjecture remains unproven. Even Brooks couldn't crack it. Malik stared at that name. Even Brooks. And here he was. Just a janitor's son with a notebook and a borrowed pen, and he was already closer than they thought. That night, over dinner, ramen and microwave broccoli, Vanessa asked, "What did you decide about that professor?" Malik looked up. "He gave me a problem." She frowned. "What kind of problem?" "The kind he thinks I can't solve." Vanessa put down her fork. "Baby, be careful. This world, it'll lift you up just to laugh when you fall." Malik didn't answer right away. He knew she wasn't trying to stop him. She was just trying to protect him, from disappointment, from heartbreak, from believing too hard in something that might not love him back. "I just want to try," he said quietly. She looked at him. Her tired eyes softened. "I know you do," she whispered. "I know you will." Later that night, Malik climbed up to the roof. The city stretched before him, broken, beautiful, buzzing. Cars hummed in the distance. Planes blinked like fireflies in the sky. And there above it all, the stars. He looked up at them, notebook in hand, and whispered the question he never said out loud. What if I actually belong up there? Malik first saw the stars through a telescope made from PVC pipe and a cracked lens. It wasn't from a science fair or museum trip. God knew Booker T didn't have the budget for those. It was in the back of room 202, behind a stack of unused textbooks and a dead projector. That telescope didn't even work right, but it didn't matter. What Malik saw that day wasn't the moon or Mars or Saturn's rings. He saw the man who changed everything, Mr. Rafael Alvarez. It was the first week of 9th grade. Malik had just transferred after a fight at his last school. Some kid called him Space Boy and pushed him down the stairs. Not for being weird, but for being too smart. Malik didn't fight back. He just stopped raising his hand. Then came physics. Most teachers started the year with syllabus sheets and threats about tardiness. Alvarez started with a question written on the board in neon green chalk. What is time? Malik stared at it, his heart racing like someone had just handed him the keys to a locked room in his head. The bell rang. Mr. Alvarez didn't introduce himself. Didn't take roll. Just paced back and forth, throwing out questions like firecrackers. If gravity bends space, does it bend time? If the universe is expanding, what's it expanding into? If light can be both particle and wave, what else in life can be two things at once? Kids laughed. Some checked out. One girl raised her hand and asked, "Is this gonna be on the test?" Alvarez just smiled like a magician about to pull off something wild. And then he said the words that locked into Malik's soul forever. I'm not here to prepare you for a test. I'm here to prepare you for the unknown. By the end of the month, Malik was staying late after class. Every day. Not for extra credit. Not for a grade. For questions. They'd sit on the floor with whiteboards, scribbling diagrams and tossing around ideas. Black holes. Quantum entanglement. Grand unified theories. Things way beyond a 14-year-old's curriculum, but never beyond Malik's curiosity. Alvarez treated him like a colleague, not a student. You're not just smart, Malik, he'd say. You're a translator. You feel math before you write it down. Malik didn't know what that meant at the time. But he knew it felt right. It lasted 3 months. Then one day, Alvarez wasn't at school. The room was empty. No green chalk. No wild diagrams. Just a sub with a printed worksheet and a dead expression. The official line was reassignment. Unofficially, the rumors were louder. He got fired for teaching crazy stuff. Someone complained. Said he was putting ideas in kids' heads. Dude told a class the Big Bang could have been a black hole's other side. What kind of science is that? Malik asked the office if they had a forwarding address. A phone number. Anything. They had nothing. No goodbye. No explanation. Just a name erased from the board and replaced by silence. Malik kept the last problem Alvarez had given him. A riddle, really. Written on the back of a napkin from the cafeteria. What's the speed of thought? It wasn't a question with a real answer. It was a dare. To never stop wondering. Sometimes, in the years that followed, Malik wondered if he'd imagined it all. If Alvarez was a dream, a figment conjured from the boredom of school hallways and the hunger of an untapped mind. Because nobody else talked about him. Teachers moved on. Students forgot. Even the telescope disappeared, confiscated or trashed or sold at some forgotten auction of non-essential items. But Malik never forgot. Now, 3 years later, with a Harvard professor's card sitting in his backpack, Malik felt that familiar itch in his brain. The same feeling he used to get after one of Alvarez's lectures, the need to understand. He sat in his room that night, the napkin still folded in the back of his notebook, and tried to trace the line from then to now. If Alvarez hadn't sparked the fire, would he have noticed the whiteboard in that Harvard hall? Would he have recognized the math? Would he have even dared pick up the chalk? The next morning, Malik found himself walking past his old middle school. The gate was still rusted. The windows still fogged from inside. But something was different. The bulletin board had a flyer for a STEM for All after-school program. Underneath it, a signature. Dr. Rafael Alvarez, guest speaker. His heart stopped. It couldn't be. Could it? The event was set for Friday. 2 days from now. He stared at the flyer for a long moment. Then took a picture. Then tore it down and folded it into his pocket like something sacred. He didn't know what he'd say if he saw him again. Didn't know if the man would even remember. But one thing was certain. He was going. That night, Malik worked until 3 a.m. on the problem Professor Brooks had given him. Not because he wanted to impress Harvard. But because finally, he felt like all the parts of himself were converging, Alvarez's questions, his mother's strength, the math itself. He was tired of hiding. He was ready to be seen. Somewhere out there, under a sky full of stars, Malik whispered to himself. If he remembered me, maybe I can remember me too. Harvard looked different at night. By day, it was a fortress of prestige, bustling with students, buzzing with lectures, exuding that quiet confidence of a place that knew it was important. But after sunset, when the crowds vanished and the lights dimmed, Harvard became something else. Silent. Still. Vulnerable. That was when Vanessa Johnson went to work. She'd been cleaning these halls for 15 years. Back when Malik was still in diapers, she'd strap him to her chest in a carrier while she pushed mop buckets through the science center. When he got older, he'd sit in a corner with a picture book while she scrubbed floors under portraits of men who'd never lived a day in her world. Now he walked these halls beside her. Taller. Quieter. Dreaming louder than ever. But she still pushed the same mop. Still polished the same brass doorknobs, still emptied the same trash cans filled with half-eaten sandwiches and crumpled exam papers. To Vanessa, Harvard wasn't a dream. It was a job. That night, as she swiped her ID badge and opened the basement supply closet, Malik was already a step behind, carrying a bucket like he'd done it 100 times. Because he had. You good? She asked without looking. Yeah, Malik said. Just tired. She paused, studying him. Your mind's spinning. I can see it. He shrugged. You been thinking about that, Professor? Kind of, he admitted. I've also been thinking about Mr. Alvarez. He's coming back. Friday. He's giving a talk. Vanessa raised her eyebrows. That the one who disappeared? Yeah. He was the first person who made me feel like I wasn't crazy. Vanessa gave a quiet smile, a sad one. You're not crazy, baby. You just see more than the rest of us. Malik didn't know how to respond to that. He looked down at the mop bucket instead. They moved through the halls together, just like always, quietly, invisibly. Vanessa wiped fingerprints off glass doors, Malik vacuumed the edges of the lecture halls. Somewhere down the corridor, another janitor's radio hummed softly with old R&B. It felt almost peaceful. Almost. In one of the labs, Vanessa paused to look at a whiteboard covered in scrawled equations and graphs. I don't know what any of this means, she murmured. But it looks beautiful. Malik smiled. You ever think about going back to school? He asked, gently. She laughed, short, sharp. Not mocking, but honest. Boy, I am in school. Life's the hardest class there is. He chuckled, but his chest tightened. Vanessa noticed. Don't do that, she said. Don't carry guilt for things that ain't yours. I made choices. I had you. I worked these floors so you wouldn't have to. Malik's voice was soft. I know. I want you to see what it looks like from the other side. She turned to face him fully now, her voice dropping low. I do see it. Every time I see you. They stopped in front of the lecture hall, the same one where it all started a few nights ago. Vanessa hesitated before unlocking the door. You really solved something in there, she asked. Malik nodded slowly. Not all of it. But enough. She looked at him for a long moment. That chalkboard ain't meant for kids like us. I know, he said. But maybe it should be. Vanessa unlocked the door, and they stepped into the darkness. The air still carried the faint scent of coffee and chalk. Malik turned on the lights. There it was. The board. Still stained with faint outlines of his work. Vanessa walked up to it and touched the edge. I used to clean this board every week, she said. Never thought my baby's name might end up on it one day. Malik's heart ached. Maybe one day it really will, he said. She smiled at him, eyes shining. I already see it. Later that night, as they rode the T train home, shoulder to shoulder in the worn vinyl seats, Vanessa leaned her head against the window and closed her eyes. Malik watched her for a long time. There were lines in her face he'd never noticed before. Worry lines. Sleepless lines. Sacrifice lines. He thought about all the nights she came home limping, or with cleaning chemicals on her skin that made her cough. Thought about all the birthday gifts she skipped for herself to buy him books. Thought about how many times she told him, "No, I'm fine," when he knew she wasn't. She didn't need a classroom to teach. Her whole life had been a lesson. That weekend, Malik found a photo from when he was 6. Him sitting on a stack of books in the break room at Harvard, beaming. Behind him, a whiteboard with a stick figure drawing of a rocket. Vanessa was in the corner, holding a mop. Smiling. He slipped it into his notebook, next to the napkin Alvarez had written on. Proof that he came from something. Proof that he was going somewhere. On Sunday, just before dinner, Malik turned to his mom and asked, "What would you have done if life had gone different?" Vanessa didn't hesitate. I would have gone to school. I would have studied medicine. Maybe physics. I always liked the stars too. Malik's eyes widened. Why didn't you ever say that? She smiled, almost sheepish. Because sometimes, dreams don't die. They just pass down. That night, Malik fell asleep with the lights on, equations scattered around his bed like puzzle pieces. And in the corner of his desk drawer, where he kept the most important things. His mom's Harvard janitor badge. Right next to the business card of Professor Nathaniel Brooks. The problem was only 2 lines long. Just 2 lines, scrawled in careful black ink on thick ivory paper. No title. No instructions. Just pure, unfiltered math. It came in an envelope hand-delivered to Vanessa Johnson's apartment by a Harvard courier. No stamp. No return address. Inside, a sticky note. 1 week. Don't look for shortcuts. N. Brooks. Malik stared at it for a full hour before writing anything down. And when he did, it wasn't equations. It was this. Why me? The problem wasn't just hard, it was mean. It didn't behave. It didn't play by rules. It took everything Malik thought he knew about space-time geometry, flipped it upside down, then dared him to make sense of it. He started by trying to copy it into his notebook. Then he tried simplifying it. Rewriting the terms. Splitting it into vectors and functions, into tensors and subfields. Nothing worked. It was like trying to untangle barbed wire with your bare hands. Every step deeper into the problem seemed to punish him. The math pushed back. By the second night, he stopped sleeping. His room turned into a war zone, pages scattered on the floor, walls covered in taped-up diagrams, post-its with half-baked ideas scrawled in Sharpie. The napkin from Alvarez sat beside his bed, untouched. The photo of his mom at Harvard hung near the light switch, where he could see it every time he stood up to stretch. But he barely moved. He only stopped to eat when Vanessa forced a sandwich into his hand. "Baby," she said gently one morning, "what if you just told that professor you gave it your best?" Malik looked up from his notebook, eyes red-rimmed. "If I stop now, I'll always wonder." She nodded. Didn't push. Just kissed the top of his head. Then whispered, "Don't lose yourself in it, Malik. You're not a machine." By day 4, he thought about quitting. He slammed his pen down, shoved the chair back, and stood over his desk like it had betrayed him. "This is pointless," he muttered. He kicked at a stack of notes. Papers flew. Equations shattered into chaos. For the first time, he cried, not because of the problem, but because of what it represented. What if I'm not who they think I am? What if I was just lucky? What if Mr. Alvarez was wrong? What if my mom is counting on a fantasy? He dropped to the floor, back against the wall, head in his hands. The numbers didn't care. Later that night, something changed. He wasn't thinking anymore. He was just staring at the problem. At the space between the symbols. At the absence of logic. And that's when it hit him. The equation wasn't broken. It was incomplete. He wasn't supposed to solve it by force. He was supposed to feel where the gap was, like an unfinished melody missing its final note. He grabbed a fresh sheet. Started from scratch. This time, he didn't try to manipulate the equation. He let it guide him. He let it breathe. By dawn, he had something new. It wasn't a complete solution, but it was different. He introduced a variable transformation no one on the forums had mentioned. A rotating frame of reference that simplified the nonlinear parts. A wild idea. One that worked. Sort of. It didn't solve the whole equation, but it made one part elegant. And elegance in physics meant something. It meant truth was nearby. He emailed Brooks at 6:14 a.m. Subject line, partial solution, rotating symmetry suggestion. He didn't expect a reply. But at 8:03 a.m., it came. Impressive. Unexpected. Meet me Friday. Same hall, 8 p.m. Bring your notes. Brooks. That entire day, Malik walked differently. He wasn't cocky. Wasn't sure of anything. But for the first time, he felt like he belonged in the conversation. Even if he was still on the outside. Even if his notes were scribbled on the backs of grocery store receipts and loose-leaf paper from the dollar store. He knew one thing, he had pushed back. And the problem had moved. That night at dinner, Vanessa slid a folded paper across the table. It was a bill. Rent due. Light bill. Internet. Malik stared at it, then looked up. Vanessa gave a soft shrug. It's tight this month. But we'll manage. Malik's throat tightened. I can get a job, he said. Vanessa shook her head. You already have one. Solving that thing. But this doesn't pay the bills. She reached across the table and gripped his hand. Maybe not now. But one day, your mind's gonna change everything. One day, somebody's gonna write a check with your name on it, and I won't be pushing mops anymore. Later, as Malik sat by the window with his notebook, he heard kids playing outside. The same kids who used to call him Space Boy. The ones who laughed when he brought books to lunch. Now they were older. Louder. But not any closer to leaving. He stared at the glowing pages of equations in front of him. He had to make this count. He picked up the napkin Alvarez had left him. Turned it over. On the back, in faded ink, was a line Malik had forgotten was there. Genius isn't knowing all the answers. It's refusing to stop asking. He smiled. Then wrote one more equation before going to sleep. The auditorium was barely half full, and still it felt like it was too loud. Students milled around with notebooks and lukewarm interest. A few parents whispered to each other, checking their phones every few minutes. A dusty banner hung across the back wall, STEM for all, inspiring futures. Malik sat alone, dead center of the third row. Hands folded. Heart pounding. He wasn't here for the free pizza. He was here for the ghost. At exactly 6 p.m., the door creaked open. No introduction. No applause. Just a man walking to the podium with a slow, deliberate gait. Gray threaded through his beard now. His hair was shorter, tighter. His jacket frayed at the cuffs, one elbow patched with duct tape. But Malik knew him instantly. Mr. Rafael Alvarez. Still wearing the same kind of eyes. Wild. Alive. The kind that didn't look at the world so much as interrogate it. He stood in front of the microphone, adjusted it once, and scanned the room. Then he saw Malik. And stopped. Just for a second. Like a ripple had passed through time itself. Then he smiled. Quietly. Like seeing something he thought he lost. My name is Rafael Alvarez, he began, voice steady but worn. I used to teach high school physics. Now I lecture at community centers and tutor at-risk youth for free. I'm what Harvard might call an academic dropout. What I call myself, is awake. A few chuckles. A few raised eyebrows. Malik leaned forward. Alvarez clicked a remote, and behind him, a slide lit up. A photo of the universe. Deep field. Stars so far away they barely existed when Earth was born. We live in a galaxy that doesn't know our names, he said. And yet, here we are, trying to leave a mark anyway. He talked about gravity wells. About the lie of IQ scores. About how light bends around mass and sometimes truth bends around power. He told them about failed students who became inventors. About janitors who discovered more than the people they cleaned up after. And somewhere in the middle, his voice lowered. There was once a student, he said, scanning the room again. He was quiet. Brilliant. Saw the world in fractals before he ever learned the word. He reminded me why I got into teaching in the first place. Malik felt his chest tighten. He disappeared after I left. I don't know what happened to him. But I hope, wherever he is, he never stopped asking questions. After the applause, Malik waited until the last person left. He walked down the aisle slowly, every step echoing louder in his head. And then they stood face to face, teacher and student. Mr. Alvarez, Malik said. Alvarez smiled wider. Malik Johnson. He pulled him into a hug, tight, real. Look at you, he said. Taller than me. You still ask why more than how. All the time, Malik grinned. You look like you've been through it. Malik nodded. I have. And you? Alvarez exhaled. Let's just say, brilliance scares people when it doesn't come in the right package. They sat on the edge of the stage, legs swinging like old times. Malik pulled out his notebook, flipping through the chaotic pages of symbols, diagrams, breakthroughs. I solved part of it, he said. The Harvard problem. Alvarez's eyes gleamed. Of course you did. They want to meet. Professor Brooks. Tomorrow. Alvarez's face darkened a bit. Be careful with men like him. You know him? Not directly. But I've met his type. They love discovery, until it challenges their hierarchy. Some will lift you just to say they were the first to find you. Then leave you when you don't behave like they planned. Malik looked down. I don't want to be someone's story. I want to write my own. Alvarez reached over, placed a firm hand on his shoulder. Then write it loud. Don't play small to make them comfortable. But don't lose your soul chasing their approval either. They talked for hours. About string theory. About racism in academia. About the pressure to be exceptional when you're black and brilliant and poor. You think if I dress right, speak right, they'll take me seriously? Malik asked. Alvarez laughed, bitter. You can wear a suit and still be treated like you snuck in the back door. What matters is you believe you belong there. Even when they don't. He paused. Especially when they don't. Before they parted, Malik hesitated. Then said, quietly, they erased you, you know. I know, Alvarez said. I never forgot. That made Alvarez smile. I didn't either. Outside, the night was cold. Wind sliced through Malik's hoodie as he stepped onto the street, but he didn't shiver. He walked with fire in his chest. A fire that came from being seen. Remembered. Reminded that his mind wasn't just a tool, it was a weapon, a compass, and a home. That night, he wrote in his journal. The stars don't need permission to shine. Neither do I. Malik had never seen Harvard so empty. The moon cast long shadows across the courtyard, turning the brick buildings into something out of a Gothic novel. The kind of place where knowledge whispered through the walls and history pressed against your chest like weight. He adjusted his hoodie and stepped inside the Science Center. The echo of his footsteps bounced through the corridor as he climbed the marble steps. Every creak of the stairwell sounded louder than it should, like the building itself was holding its breath. Lecture Hall B was dark, until it wasn't. A single lamp switched on at the front of the room. Professor Nathaniel Brooks stood beside the chalkboard, sleeves rolled, tie loosened, like he'd been waiting for hours and wasn't used to waiting at all. Mr. Johnson, he said without looking up. You came. Malik stepped forward slowly, clutching a folder of notes, his palms damp with sweat. I said I would. Brooks finally turned to face him. Tall. Sharp. Polished like glass but cold like it too. He had the kind of presence that made people shrink. But Malik had already spent years being smaller than he was. Tonight, he stayed tall. Brooks motioned to a desk at the front row. Sit. Malik did. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable, it was calculated. Brooks was watching him. Measuring him. You did something interesting, he said. I didn't expect you to get that far. Malik swallowed. I didn't solve it. Just reframed it. Brooks nodded. Which is often more valuable than solving it. He turned to the board and began sketching Malik's transformation, the rotational symmetry Malik had discovered, the way it simplified a component of the tensor equation that had stumped even postdocs. The math is raw. But it's intuitive, Brooks said. You didn't get this from textbooks. No. Who taught you? Malik hesitated. A high school teacher. Before he was let go. Brooks turned back, slowly. Fascinating. There was a pause. Then Brooks said, do you know why I sent you that problem? Malik shook his head. It wasn't a test of ability. It was a test of resilience. I've seen people with perfect scores fold under pressure. But you? You held on through uncertainty. Through doubt. That's the mark of someone who might actually matter. Malik's throat tightened. Why me, though? Brooks studied him for a moment. Because brilliance from unexpected places forces the system to evolve. And because sometimes, the best minds are born where no one's looking. That felt like a compliment, and a warning. Brooks walked to his desk and pulled out a thick folder. He placed it in front of Malik. Inside, university forms, scholarship details, letters of recommendation, research assistant programs. You won't find this offer online, Brooks said. And you won't find many like it again. Malik stared at the papers. It looked like a future. I'm not even out of high school. We'll fix that. You'll finish dual enrollment. Early admissions. Mentorship. You'll work under me, help refine this theory, maybe even publish it with me. Malik blinked. Publish, with you? Brooks leaned in slightly. If you want to be part of this world, you'll need someone to bring you in. It's not fair. It's just true. There it was. The deal. Malik looked down at the folder, then back at the board. His work. His ideas. Refined now, yes. But still his. And yet something gnawed at him. Why me? He repeated, quieter. Brooks didn't answer right away. Then he said, because every institution needs its prodigy. And the story of a janitor's son who cracks a puzzle we couldn't. That's irresistible. Malik flinched. There it was, the real answer. Not just about talent. But about narrative. Optics. Malik stood slowly. He didn't yell. Didn't curse. He just said, you don't care about me. You care about what I prove. Brooks raised an eyebrow. You think I'm exploiting you? I think you don't see me. You see Harvard's next success story. One you can take credit for. Brooks smiled, but it was thin. That may be true. But what matters more, who gets the credit, or who gets the opportunity? Malik stared at the papers again. The pages didn't lie. It was real. It could change his life. But at what cost? He thought of his mom, pushing that mop. He thought of Alvarez, erased. He thought of himself, a kid with chalk dust in his hands and stars in his mind. Then he said, I'll work with you. But on my terms. Brooks looked intrigued. Go on. You put my name on everything I touch. I want transparency. I want mentorship, not ownership. And I want room to build something that's mine, not just extend yours. Brooks was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded. That's bold. I'm used to earning my place twice. Brooks extended a hand. Then let's begin. Malik didn't shake it. Not yet. Instead, he turned to the chalkboard. Picked up the chalk. And began writing. Not to prove anything. But because this was where he belonged. The next few days felt like a blur, emails, late-night study sessions, quick meetings with Brooks that always ended too soon. Malik barely had time to catch his breath, but something inside of him, some persistent, nagging feeling, kept him awake long after the lights in his dorm had been turned off. The papers Brooks had given him weren't just forms for scholarships or grants, they were the key to something bigger. Something that could change everything. And yet, as Malik pored over the equations and research notes, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. It wasn't the work itself, that was brilliant, compelling. But there was a certain ownership in it, an undercurrent of something that felt like it belonged to Brooks more than it belonged to him. It wasn't just about solving equations. It was about control. One evening, a few weeks into their partnership, Malik found himself alone in the lab. The fluorescent lights buzzed above him, casting harsh shadows across the pages he had scattered on the table. He had been working on an extension of the theory, something Brooks hadn't asked for, but something Malik felt was the next step. A little bit of his voice in the mix. He heard the door open behind him before he turned around. Brooks stepped in, holding a coffee cup, his usual self-assured stride matched by the tightness around his eyes. Working late? Brooks asked. Malik nodded. Trying to refine the equation for the next paper. Good, Brooks replied. But remember, we're on a tight deadline. We'll need to get it submitted to Nature soon. Malik raised an eyebrow. Already? I thought we were still finalizing the models. Brooks leaned against the table, his eyes glinting. Perfection can always come later. But momentum is something you can't let slip. Malik didn't answer. He felt the weight of the conversation settling on his chest. Something about Brooks' tone didn't sit right. The rush, the urgency, it all felt manufactured. The next day, Malik found himself in the university's library, flipping through journals, trying to find more material on the topic. As he skimmed the pages of one particular journal, a familiar name jumped out at him. Nathaniel Brooks. The article was one of the earliest publications in the field, one that Malik had read in high school. But what caught his attention was the name listed at the bottom of the paper, Contributions by Nathaniel Brooks and Malik Johnson. But Malik hadn't written that paper. He hadn't even seen it until now. Confused, Malik scrolled through the article. The methodology was identical to the work they had been doing together. The equations were the same. The language was the same. But there was no mention of Malik's involvement in the research. His pulse quickened. The inkling that had been bugging him for days was now a full-blown knot in his stomach. He'd read it over and over in Brooks' papers, ownership. Brooks had a way of taking what was not his, of claiming work that wasn't solely his own. That afternoon, Malik walked into the lab, more determined than ever to find out what was really going on. He was going to ask Brooks about the paper, about the credit. He didn't expect to find Brooks in his office, though. He was sitting at his desk, staring at his computer screen, when Malik walked in. Without looking up, Brooks said, "I saw you in the library. Looking up old papers." Malik stood frozen, the air thick with unspoken tension. He swallowed hard before speaking. "I need to ask you something." Brooks glanced up, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Go ahead." "I saw the paper in Nature. The one that's credited to you and me. But I didn't write it. I didn't even know about it until today." Brooks' face didn't betray a single emotion. He leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You think I took credit for your work?" Malik's hands clenched into fists at his sides. "I don't think, Professor. I know. The paper is practically identical to the work we've been doing, but I wasn't credited. It says, contributions by you and me, but I never saw it before today." Brooks' lips tightened into a thin line. "I didn't think it would matter. You're young, Malik. You're still learning how this world works. Do you think anyone cares about one more footnote in a journal?" Malik's heart hammered in his chest. "I care." "Then you're naive," Brooks said, his tone cold. "This is how it works. People like me get the credit. People like you," he paused, a cruel smile flickering across his lips. "You get to be part of something bigger. And if you're lucky, people will remember your name. But it doesn't matter who gets the credit as long as we get the result." Malik stood frozen for a moment. The weight of Brooks' words hung heavy in the room, the air thick with an unbearable mix of truth and betrayal. He had been so focused on the work, so eager to prove himself, that he hadn't even realized the game Brooks was playing. He turned and walked toward the door, his mind racing. "Malik," Brooks called after him. "You're smarter than most. Don't be a fool and let your pride get in the way of progress. This is how the world works." Malik's hand gripped the doorframe, his voice shaking. "I'm not just a tool for your agenda, Professor. And I won't let you erase me." The door slammed behind him. Later that night, as he sat at his desk, Malik stared at the equation he had been working on, the equation that was his, the one he had rewritten and rethought from the ground up. He had been used. Manipulated. But in that moment, he realized something important. He could still make this his own. He wasn't going to play the game on Brooks' terms. He was going to rewrite the rules. And when the world saw his name, it would be for the work he had done, alone. The days following his confrontation with Professor Brooks were strange. The silence was heavier than ever, the tension between Malik and Brooks palpable in every interaction. Brooks kept his distance, no longer pushing him to submit their research to Nature, but that didn't stop him from making occasional, cutting remarks about Malik's inexperience. It was clear to Malik now, Brooks didn't see him as a peer. He saw him as an asset. A useful tool to further his own career. But Malik was done being used. It had been 3 days since the blow-up in the lab, and Malik spent the evenings in his dorm room, going over his research notes, his own research notes. He didn't need Brooks. Not anymore. Still, the question remained, what would he do next? He had no shortage of offers. Several universities had reached out after his work on the tensor equations gained traction, with a few promising research assistant positions on the table. The problem was, none of those positions had the same prestige as Brooks' offer. None of them would give him the same exposure. The same platform. But Malik didn't care about prestige anymore. He cared about being seen, truly seen for his work, not his background or the stories surrounding him. That afternoon, Malik received a message that made his blood run cold, a new email from Brooks. From Nathaniel Brooks. Subject, decision time. Malik. We both know what this is. There's no need for more games. If you want to go on your own, then do so. I've already informed the department that I'll be taking over the tensor equation project. Your contributions will be acknowledged in the official publication, but your name will remain in the acknowledgements. You don't have the network to go it alone, Malik. Don't waste your time. Nathaniel. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. A part of him wanted to scream. Another part of him wanted to pack up and leave Harvard, leave academia, leave everything behind. But the fire inside him wouldn't let him back down. He wasn't going to let Brooks get away with this. Not when he knew he had something real. Something that could make a difference. He needed to make a choice. Malik sat at his desk, staring at the screen, his fingers trembling over the keyboard. He had drafted a response, over and over, only to delete each one. Words seemed so inadequate. How could he sum up everything that was wrong with Brooks' offer? How could he convey the betrayal without sounding like an angry child? Finally, after what felt like hours, he began to type. From Malik Johnson. Subject, my decision. Professor Brooks. Thank you for your email. It's clear that you've made your decision. But I've made mine as well. I'm choosing to walk away from this. I won't be a part of a system where my contributions are sidelined. I won't be a cog in someone else's machine. I'm not asking for a seat at the table anymore. I'm building my own. Malik Johnson. He hit send before he could second-guess himself. The message was short, but it felt like a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. That night, as Malik lay in his bed, staring up at the ceiling, he realized just how big of a step he had taken. He was no longer under anyone's thumb. He was no longer the janitor's son, the outcast, or the unknown. He was Malik Johnson, an individual, a thinker, a creator. And he wasn't going to let anyone take that away from him. In the following days, Malik received a flood of messages. Some from his former classmates, congratulating him on standing up to Brooks. Others were more cautious, urging him to reconsider, telling him he was throwing away an opportunity. They didn't understand. None of them did. He didn't expect them to. But what Malik didn't expect was the call he received on the 5th day after his decision. It was from Dr. Ava Reyes, a professor at MIT whom he had met briefly during a guest lecture last year. She had been following his work, his real work, not the one filtered through Brooks' lens, and had an opportunity for him. She wasn't offering him a handout. She was offering him a partnership. I've been following your research, Malik, Dr. Reyes said over the phone. And I think we could do something incredible together. You don't need to be anyone's shadow. I want to build something from the ground up. You interested? Malik could hear the sincerity in her voice, the genuine interest that had been lacking in everything Brooks had said. He sat up straighter in his chair, a sense of clarity washing over him. "Yeah," Malik said, his voice steady for the first time in days. "I'm interested." The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Dr. Reyes and her team welcomed him into their fold, encouraging him to refine his theories and contribute in ways that felt organic, not forced. She valued his perspective, his unique approach to problems, and, most importantly, his voice. For the first time in a long time, Malik felt like he was where he belonged. But that didn't mean the road ahead would be easy. Malik's decision wasn't without its consequences. Brooks and the department didn't take kindly to his departure, and whispers spread through the academic halls. But Malik didn't care. He had chosen to walk away from a system that had tried to define him and was now defining himself. The work with Dr. Reyes wasn't without challenges. They had to fight for funding, navigate institutional politics, and prove that their unconventional approach to physics could yield results. But every hurdle only made Malik more determined. Every day was a reminder that he wasn't just some underdog. He was a force in his own right. And then, one crisp autumn morning, as Malik stared at the latest equations on his whiteboard, he realized something. He had done it. He had solved the problem Brooks couldn't. But more importantly, he had done it on his own terms. The weeks following Malik's decision to join Dr. Reyes' team felt like a breath of fresh air. Every day, he woke up excited about the possibilities ahead. Unlike his time with Brooks, this was a partnership, an environment where his contributions were valued, and where the work mattered more than the name attached to it. Dr. Reyes had given him the space to explore his ideas without the suffocating pressure of perfection. They dove into the tensor equation with a renewed sense of purpose, building on Malik's insights and refining their approach. It was a collaboration in its truest sense, and Malik felt alive in a way he hadn't in years. But as the research progressed, so did the stakes. It had been 6 months since Malik made his decision, and they were finally ready. The paper was complete, the equations were solved, the theories were proven, and the findings were groundbreaking. Malik had done it. He had solved the problem that had stumped Harvard professors, and now, he was about to share it with the world. But with every victory came a new challenge. One afternoon, Dr. Reyes called Malik into her office. She was sitting behind her desk, a stack of papers neatly arranged in front of her. The normally upbeat woman looked unusually tense. "Malik, we need to talk," she said, her tone more serious than usual. "Something's come up." Malik raised an eyebrow, his heart skipping a beat. "What happened?" Dr. Reyes hesitated for a moment before continuing. "I've just received an email from the journal. It's Nature. They want to publish our paper." Malik's eyes widened. "That's amazing." Dr. Reyes nodded, but there was a shadow in her gaze. "Yes, but here's the problem. They want us to revise the submission before they accept it. And it's not because of the science, it's because of the credit." Malik's stomach twisted. "What do you mean, credit?" "Some of the reviewers have raised concerns. They claim that your work on the tensor equation is too similar to Professor Brooks' research. They want us to revise the paper to include more citations to his work, even though we both know it doesn't belong." Malik leaned forward, a cold fury settling over him. "Are they serious? Our work is our own. It's not based on Brooks' theories." "I know," Dr. Reyes said, frustration evident in her voice. "But it's the politics of academia. Brooks has a lot of influence, Malik. His name carries weight. The journal doesn't want to risk controversy." Malik clenched his fists. "So now we're going to have to pay homage to Brooks, just because he's got power." Dr. Reyes sighed. "It's more than just about credit. It's about ensuring that this research isn't suppressed. Brooks has connections at Nature. If we don't play ball, they could bury our paper altogether." Malik's mind raced. This wasn't just about a paper anymore, it was about the integrity of the research, the years of hard work, and the fight to make sure his voice was heard. It wasn't just Brooks trying to take credit. It was the entire system, the very structure of academia, that was trying to erase him. That evening, Malik sat in his apartment, staring at his laptop screen, the email from Nature open in front of him. The weight of Dr. Reyes' words hung over him like a storm cloud. He knew what he had to do, what they both had to do. But it wasn't an easy decision. He was being asked to sacrifice his integrity to get his work published. He was being asked to play the game. But Malik was tired of playing other people's games. He was done with people deciding his future for him. The next morning, Malik called Dr. Reyes. He had made up his mind. "We're not going to revise the paper," Malik said, his voice steady. "We submit it as it is. If they don't want it because of the politics, then fine. We'll find another journal. I'm not compromising on this." Dr. Reyes was quiet for a moment. "Are you sure? This is a big risk. If Nature doesn't accept the paper, it might set us back months, even years." "I know," Malik said. "But if we give in to the politics, we're no better than the system that's kept us down in the first place. Our work speaks for itself. If they can't see that, then we'll find someone who will." The decision was made. Malik and Dr. Reyes submitted the paper to Nature without revisions. They knew the risks. The academic world was ruthless, and they had just set themselves up for a battle. But Malik didn't care anymore. He was tired of playing by other people's rules. He was tired of living in the shadow of someone else's legacy. It was time for him to make his own mark. Days passed, and Malik waited. Every email, every phone call, made his heart race. Would Nature accept their paper, or would they bow to Brooks and his influence? Then, one morning, the email came. From Nature editorial team. Subject: Acceptance of submission. Dear Dr. Reyes and Mr. Johnson. We are pleased to inform you that your paper, The Solution to the Tensor Equation and its Implications for Quantum Mechanics, has been accepted for publication in Nature. Congratulations on your groundbreaking work. We will be in touch regarding the next steps. Best regards. Nature editorial team. Malik's eyes scanned the email, and his heart skipped a beat. They had done it. But their victory was short-lived. Later that afternoon, Malik received a call. It was from one of his former classmates at Harvard, a student in the physics department. "Malik, you might want to hear this," his classmate said. "Professor Brooks is furious. He's trying to discredit your paper. I heard he's calling in favors with some of the editors at Nature. He's not going to let this go." Malik's blood ran cold. He had known it wouldn't be easy, but this was more than just academic rivalry. This was war. The next few weeks were a blur of meetings, emails, and phone calls. Brooks was relentless. He called in every favor, every connection he had in the academic world. But Malik and Dr. Reyes held their ground. And then, one day, it happened. Nature released their paper to the world, without a single mention of Brooks' influence. Malik leaned back in his chair, staring at the screen. The equation he had solved, the one that had eluded so many, was now out in the world, and it was his. But the battle wasn't over. It was just beginning. The morning after their paper was published, Malik woke up with a sense of triumph. For the first time in his life, he felt like he had truly earned something. The work was his and Dr. Reyes, and it was out there for the world to see. They had achieved the impossible. But as the day went on, that sense of pride began to fade, replaced by a growing unease. The emails started pouring in, not with congratulations, but with questions. Criticisms. Attacks. It started with the academics. "Malik, you and Dr. Reyes might want to see this," said Liam, one of Dr. Reyes' research assistants. He was standing in the doorway of their lab, holding up his phone. The headline on his screen made Malik's heart drop. Harvard's Tensor Equation, a dispute over authorship. The article, published by a well-known academic blog, immediately called attention to the controversy surrounding the publication. It claimed that the tensor equation Malik and Dr. Reyes had solved was based on earlier work by Professor Brooks, without proper acknowledgement. Malik's pulse quickened as he read the words. The research, while groundbreaking, bears uncanny similarities to the work of Professor Nathaniel Brooks, who has long been recognized as a leading expert in the field. Dr. Reyes frowned, her face hardening as she scanned the article. It's begun, she muttered under her breath. Malik could hardly believe what he was seeing. The article wasn't just questioning their work, it was attacking their integrity. The suggestion that their work wasn't original, that they had borrowed from Brooks without giving credit, was outrageous. It was a direct shot at their credibility. Do you think Brooks has anything to do with this? Malik asked, his voice low, almost a growl. Dr. Reyes sighed, rubbing her temples. We knew this would happen, Malik. When you challenge the establishment, you make enemies. And Brooks, he's powerful. He's got connections. The backlash spread like wildfire. Within days, the academic community was abuzz with the controversy. Some defended Malik and Dr. Reyes, claiming the research was original and that Brooks' influence was an attempt to stifle new ideas. Others, however, sided with Brooks, saying that the similarities between the works were too significant to ignore. The debate raged on in academic forums, journals, and social media platforms. It wasn't just the academic community, though. Malik and Dr. Reyes began receiving private messages, some supportive, others filled with venom. They were being attacked not just for their science, but for their character. Accusations flew. They were trying to steal Brooks' legacy, they were opportunists looking to make a name for themselves at the expense of an established scholar. Malik found himself questioning everything. How had something so beautiful, his hard work, his triumph, turned into this ugly mess? He had done everything by the book, everything with integrity. But the system wasn't going to let him win that easily. The turning point came a week after the article was published, when Malik received an unexpected email. It was from a former classmate at Harvard, Eliza Hart, a physicist who had always been friendly, if somewhat distant, during their time together. She had been quiet during the recent controversy, but her message held a glimmer of hope. From Eliza Hart. Subject, support. Hey Malik. I know things have been tough since the publication. I wanted to reach out and offer my support. I've been following the situation, and I know how hard you've worked to get to this point. The backlash is rough, but don't let it get to you. I've spoken to a few colleagues, and there are people at MIT and Stanford who believe in your work. You're not alone in this. If you want to talk, I'm here. Eliza. Malik stared at the email for a long time. He wasn't sure what to make of it. Eliza had never been outspoken before, especially when it came to controversial topics. But her words, her quiet support, were a lifeline. He needed to hear that he wasn't alone. That the fight he was in was bigger than just him. The following day, Malik met with Dr. Reyes to discuss their next move. The situation had reached a boiling point. The academic community was divided, and the pressure from Brooks' supporters was mounting. Brooks himself had refused to comment publicly, but it was clear that he was orchestrating a campaign to undermine their work. We need to address this head-on, Malik said, determination filling his voice. We can't just sit back and wait for this to blow over. Dr. Reyes agreed, but she was cautious. We need to be careful. Brooks has a lot of influence, and if we're not strategic, we could find ourselves blacklisted. Malik clenched his jaw. I don't care about being blacklisted. What I care about is making sure our work stands on its own. I'm not going to let them bury us. That night, they drafted a response, a public statement addressing the controversy and defending the originality of their research. Malik refused to let Brooks dictate their narrative. They would speak for themselves, even if it meant going up against the most powerful figures in the field. The statement was clear. They had solved the tensor equation using independent methods, and the similarities to Brooks' earlier work were coincidental, not derivative. They acknowledged that Brooks had contributed significantly to the field, but they made it clear that their work was their own. The statement was released the next morning. The response was immediate. The backlash intensified, but something unexpected happened. There was a growing sense of respect from those who had previously been silent. Fellow scientists began reaching out, offering their support. Academic conferences were taking notice, and some even started to invite Malik and Dr. Reyes to speak, giving them a platform to defend their work. But the true test was yet to come. Professor Brooks had remained quiet, but Malik knew he wouldn't stay silent forever. He was waiting for the right moment to strike, waiting for the right opportunity to destroy their credibility once and for all. Malik steeled himself for the coming storm. The next few weeks were going to be the hardest yet, but he wasn't backing down. Not now, not after everything he had fought for. The war had begun. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? It had been a month since Malik and Dr. Reyes had published their response to the backlash. The storm had yet to subside, but they had made it through the first wave. The scientific community was divided, but they had managed to gather enough support to stand their ground. Still, Malik knew that the hardest part was yet to come. Brooks had remained strangely quiet after their public statement, and Malik had a sinking feeling that the worst was still to come. One afternoon, Malik received an unexpected phone call. It was from Eliza. "Malik, I don't know how to say this, but Brooks is finally making his move," Eliza said, her voice tense. Malik felt a knot form in his stomach. "What do you mean? What's he doing?" "He's scheduled a lecture next week at MIT," Eliza explained. "It's an invitation-only event for top physicists. And guess who's going to be there? Brooks plans to publicly refute your work, on stage. He's going to accuse you of scientific misconduct, Malik. And he's using this lecture to do it." Malik's mind raced. This was it. The moment he had feared for so long was finally here. The next day, Malik and Dr. Reyes met in their lab to discuss their strategy. The air was thick with tension. Dr. Reyes had been quiet since hearing the news, but now, she looked Malik in the eye with a steely determination. "We can't just let Brooks do this," Dr. Reyes said. "He's trying to publicly destroy everything we've worked for. If we don't respond, it'll be over." Malik nodded grimly. "I know. We need to show up at that lecture. We need to be there, not just as witnesses, but as active participants. This isn't just about defending our work anymore, it's about making sure the truth comes out." Over the next few days, Malik and Dr. Reyes prepared. They knew that Brooks would come at them with everything he had: scientific attacks, personal insults, and the weight of his academic power. They couldn't afford to make a mistake. Eliza, too, had been busy. She'd helped them gather support from fellow researchers, some of whom were willing to speak on their behalf at the MIT lecture. It was a risky move, going head-to-head with Brooks in such a public forum, but it was the only way to ensure that their side of the story was heard. The night before the lecture, Malik could hardly sleep. He lay in bed, his mind spinning. What if Brooks had already won? What if the scientific community had already made up their mind? Malik knew that the system was rigged in Brooks' favor, and the stakes were higher than ever. Dr. Reyes had noticed his restlessness. She knocked on his door and came in, her expression one of quiet resolve. "You're nervous," she said softly. "And that's okay. This is a big moment. But we've been through worse. We've fought harder battles than this. And we've made it through every single one." Malik sat up in bed, looking at her. "But what if it's not enough? What if we're just not enough?" Dr. Reyes smiled gently, her eyes full of wisdom. "You've already proven that you're more than enough. Remember, Malik, the truth has a way of coming out. No matter how hard people try to bury it, it always finds a way. And you? You've got the truth on your side. Malik felt a surge of determination. He nodded. You're right. Tomorrow, we fight. And we don't back down. The day of the lecture arrived. The air was thick with anticipation as top physicists from across the country gathered at MIT. The auditorium was packed, and whispers filled the room as Brooks stepped up to the podium. He was dressed in his usual polished suit, the embodiment of academic authority. As he began to speak, Malik could feel the weight of his words, the poison that he was about to release into the air. Brooks wasted no time. He opened with a scathing critique of Malik and Dr. Reyes' work, claiming that the tensor equation they had solved was inherently flawed and that their methods had been borrowed from his own groundbreaking research. He didn't name Malik directly, but it was clear that he was targeting him. The research of some so-called up-and-coming scientists has been circulating, Brooks said, his voice dripping with condescension. And while they may claim to have solved a complex problem, the truth is, they've taken the work of others and tried to pass it off as their own. In science, as in life, the truth always comes out. A ripple of laughter spread across the room. Brooks had always known how to manipulate a crowd. Malik and Dr. Reyes were seated near the back of the auditorium, their eyes locked onto the stage. Malik's hands were clenched into fists, but he didn't feel the rage. He felt calm, focused. This was it, the moment they had been preparing for. When Brooks finished, he turned to the audience, waiting for questions. Malik stood up, his voice unwavering. Professor Brooks, Malik called out, his words carrying across the room. With all due respect, you are wrong. The room fell silent. All eyes were on him. Malik took a deep breath and stepped into the aisle, his gaze never leaving Brooks. Our work is original. The tensor equation we solved was not based on your theories. It was not derived from your research. It was an independent breakthrough. But you want to ignore that because it threatens your position. You want to discredit us, not because our work is flawed, but because you can't stand the idea of someone else taking the spotlight. Someone like me, someone who wasn't born into privilege, someone who doesn't have decades of academic connections. A murmur of shock passed through the audience. Brooks' face flushed with anger, but Malik pressed on. We've worked harder than anyone to get here. And I'll be damned if I let you or anyone else take that away from us. The silence in the room was deafening. For a moment, no one moved. Then, one by one, members of the audience began to clap. Slowly at first, then louder, as the realization hit, Malik and Dr. Reyes were right. They had earned their place in the scientific community. Brooks stood frozen, his face pale with disbelief. The crowd support was palpable. It was as if the collective weight of their voices had turned the tide, and for the first time, Brooks knew he had lost control of the narrative. Malik turned to Dr. Reyes, and they shared a brief look of triumph. The battle had been fought, and they had won. As the lecture came to an end, Malik and Dr. Reyes walked out of the auditorium, side by side. Malik's heart was pounding, but for the first time in weeks, it wasn't from fear. It was from a sense of victory, a victory not just over Brooks, but over the system that had tried to keep him down. They had made it. They had proven that the truth would always win. And now, the world was theirs to conquer. The aftermath of the MIT lecture was nothing short of a whirlwind. What had started as a battle for scientific integrity had turned into a public spectacle, one that captured the attention of the entire academic community, and beyond. Malik and Dr. Reyes were bombarded with emails, calls, and messages. Journalists wanted interviews, physicists wanted to collaborate, and universities were offering speaking engagements. The world was suddenly very interested in the breakthrough they had made and in the story of how they had risen against the odds. At first, it was overwhelming. Malik had never imagined that a single moment, one that had started as an act of defiance, would lead to such widespread recognition. For the first time in his life, he was no longer just a student or the son of a janitor. He was a celebrated physicist. Dr. Reyes, however, had been less enthusiastic about the rapid influx of attention. She was pragmatic, always cautious about the pitfalls that came with fame. The scientific world could be cruel, and she knew that they couldn't allow themselves to become distracted. "Malik, we have to keep our focus," Dr. Reyes said one afternoon, as they sat in their shared office at the university. They were still catching up on emails from the MIT event. "This recognition is great, but it's only the beginning. We've got to stay grounded and remember why we're here, to push the boundaries of physics, not to chase fame." Malik nodded, although a part of him couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. "I know. It feels surreal. A year ago, I was cleaning floors at Harvard. Now, I'm getting invitations to lecture at the very places I used to dream about. This is everything I've worked for." "I get that," Dr. Reyes replied, her eyes softening. "But don't lose yourself in the noise. Stay focused on the work. The real test begins now. We've got to take our research further, and that means tackling even bigger challenges." Over the next few months, Malik and Dr. Reyes dove into their work with renewed intensity. The tensor equation they had solved had opened up a new avenue for research, a way to apply quantum mechanics to fields like cosmology and artificial intelligence. They had only scratched the surface of its potential, and there was still so much to discover. But with every breakthrough, the pressure increased. More and more people were watching. Their success had attracted the attention of powerful figures in academia, and with that attention came new demands. Professor Nathaniel Brooks, though publicly silent after the MIT lecture, was still a looming presence. The shadow of his influence stretched far and wide, and Malik couldn't shake the feeling that Brooks was waiting for the perfect moment to strike back. In the midst of their research, Malik received a call from Eliza. She had some unsettling news. "Malik, I think you should be aware of something," Eliza said, her voice tense. "Brooks has been quietly reaching out to a few of the big names in the field, including some at the National Academy of Sciences. I don't have all the details, but it sounds like he's planning something big. He doesn't take kindly to losing, and I think he's gearing up for a serious comeback." Malik's blood ran cold. He had known this was coming, but hearing it confirmed made it feel all too real. Brooks wasn't just going to let this slide. The game had only just begun. "Do you think he's going to attack us publicly again?" Malik asked, his voice tight with concern. "I wouldn't put it past him," Eliza replied. "But this time, it might not be so simple. He's got a lot of power, and he could use it to manipulate the narrative again. You've got to be prepared for anything." That night, Malik and Dr. Reyes discussed their options. The specter of Brooks' retaliation hung over them like a dark cloud. They had fought one battle, but they knew that winning the war would require more than just scientific brilliance. It would take strategy, patience, and careful maneuvering. "Do we keep pushing forward with our research?" Malik asked, rubbing his forehead. The pressure was mounting, and it was starting to take its toll. "Of course," Dr. Reyes answered without hesitation. "But we also need to be ready. If Brooks decides to make a move, we need to be able to defend ourselves. We've got allies, but we need more. It's time we start thinking about building a network of support, both in the scientific community and beyond." The days that followed were a blur of activity. They had been invited to give talks at conferences, but each event felt like another battleground. Malik had grown accustomed to the constant scrutiny, the weight of expectation on his shoulders. But there were moments, fleeting as they were, when he allowed himself to feel proud. He had made it this far, and he wasn't going to let anyone take that away from him. One evening, after a particularly grueling lecture at Stanford, Malik received a message from an unexpected source. It was from Professor Evelyn Green, an influential physicist who had been following their work closely since the MIT lecture. She had been one of the few who had publicly defended Malik and Dr. Reyes, and now she was offering a proposal. From Professor Evelyn Green. Subject: Collaboration Proposal. Dear Malik, I hope this message finds you well. I have been following your progress closely, and I must say, I am incredibly impressed with the direction your research is heading. I believe that your work, in conjunction with my team's recent discoveries in quantum field theory, could lead to breakthroughs that would push the boundaries of what we know about the universe. I would like to propose a formal collaboration between our teams. Together, I believe we could tackle some of the most pressing questions in modern physics, and I would be honored to work with you and Dr. Reyes. Please let me know if this is something you would be open to discussing. Best regards. Professor Evelyn Green. Malik stared at the screen, his mind racing. A collaboration with Professor Green? It was an incredible opportunity, one that could elevate their work to new heights. But there was a part of him that was wary. They were already under immense pressure. Could they handle more? He didn't have long to deliberate. He knew that opportunities like this didn't come often. After a moment's hesitation, he typed a response. From Malik. Subject, collaboration proposal. Dear Professor Green. Thank you for reaching out. I am honored by your proposal and very excited about the potential for collaboration. Dr. Reyes and I have been discussing the next steps in our research, and we believe that a partnership could yield some groundbreaking results. Let's set up a time to discuss the details. Best regards. Malik. As he hit send, Malik couldn't help but feel a sense of excitement. This could be the beginning of something monumental. But at the same time, the weight of the looming confrontation with Brooks remained in the back of his mind. No matter how many doors opened, they would always be walking through them with the knowledge that their greatest challenge was still ahead. The collaboration between Malik, Dr. Reyes, and Professor Green began with a flurry of excitement. The potential to push the boundaries of physics was intoxicating. Professor Green's team, based at a prestigious institute in California, was known for its work in quantum field theory, and they had already made significant strides in areas Malik and Dr. Reyes were only beginning to explore. Malik was both thrilled and cautious. This collaboration could open doors to incredible discoveries, but it also brought new challenges. They were stepping into a world of academia that was even more competitive and cutthroat than the one they had already experienced. And Malik, while confident in his abilities, was acutely aware of how fragile their position was. The first few weeks of the collaboration were filled with intense brainstorming sessions and long hours in the lab. Malik found himself both inspired and overwhelmed by the scope of the research. Professor Green was brilliant, a force of nature in the world of theoretical physics, and her team was eager to build on the foundation Malik and Dr. Reyes had already established. But as the days passed, Malik began to notice subtle shifts in the dynamics of their group. Green, though warm and welcoming at first, was becoming increasingly distant. She was focused, yes, but there was an air of secrecy that Malik couldn't ignore. She would often disappear into her office for hours, leaving Malik and Dr. Reyes to work on their own. And when they did meet, it was almost as if Green was always holding something back, as though there was a hidden agenda at play. One afternoon, Malik decided to confront her. He had spent enough time wondering what was going on behind the scenes. After a particularly long meeting, where Green had barely said a word, he caught her in the hallway. Professor Green, Malik began, his voice steady but curious, I've been meaning to ask you something. It feels like you're pulling away from the group. We're all here to collaborate, but sometimes I get the sense that you're keeping something from us. Green stopped in her tracks and turned to face him, her expression unreadable. For a moment, she didn't speak, and the silence between them felt thick with unspoken tension. You're right, she said at last, her tone softening. I've been preoccupied with something. But it's not what you think, Malik. There's just a lot at stake here. You've made some incredible progress, but now things are starting to get complicated. Malik raised an eyebrow. Complicated? How? Green hesitated, then glanced around to ensure no one was listening. The physics community is watching us closely. They want results. But there are people who don't want us to succeed, Malik. There are forces in play that you're not fully aware of. And I need to make sure that our work doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Malik's heart raced. What do you mean by wrong hands? Who's trying to take our work? Green's gaze sharpened. There are powerful people in the scientific community who aren't interested in collaboration. They're interested in control. And they want to make sure your discoveries don't disrupt the status quo. You've already made enemies, Malik. I just want to make sure that your work isn't weaponized, or worse, stolen. Malik felt a chill run down his spine. Are you saying that you think someone's going to steal our research? I don't know, Green replied, her voice low. But I do know that we can't afford to be naive. That's why I've been working with a few key figures who can help protect our findings. It's a delicate balance. We need to stay ahead of the game, or we could lose everything. As the conversation ended, Malik felt a sense of unease settle in his stomach. There was no question that Green was hiding something that didn't sit right. She had alluded to powerful forces at play, but who were these people? And why was she so cryptic about the dangers they faced? Malik tried to shake off the feeling, but it lingered in his mind. He knew that Dr. Reyes would want to hear about this. So, he walked back to their shared office, trying to piece together the fragments of the conversation. Dr. Reyes was in the middle of reviewing some data when Malik arrived. He could see the tiredness in her eyes, the exhaustion that came with late nights and early mornings, but there was also something else, an edge of worry that seemed to have crept in recently. She noticed his concerned expression immediately. What's wrong? Dr. Reyes asked, setting aside her work and looking up at him. I had a conversation with Green, Malik said, sitting down across from her. She's not as transparent as we thought. Dr. Reyes raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? Malik recounted the conversation he had with Green in the hallway. By the time he was finished, Dr. Reyes was quiet, her expression thoughtful. So she's concerned about our work being taken or stolen? Dr. Reyes asked, tapping a pencil against the desk. And she's working with people to protect it? Yeah, but she's not exactly clear about who these people are, Malik replied. And I don't know if I trust her anymore. She's not telling us everything. They sat in silence for a while, both of them absorbing the implications of what Malik had shared. The idea that someone might try to steal their work, turn it into a weapon or use it for personal gain, was a nightmare that Malik hadn't even allowed himself to imagine until now. He had always believed that science was about discovery, about pushing the boundaries of knowledge for the greater good. But now, it seemed that there were darker forces at play. I don't know what Green is up to, Malik said finally, breaking the silence. But I don't like the idea of us being kept in the dark. We need to figure out what's really going on, and fast. I agree, Dr. Reyes replied. We can't afford to let anyone control the narrative, especially not Green. If she's hiding something from us, we need to find out what it is, and what she's really trying to protect. The days that followed were tense. Malik and Dr. Reyes continued their research, but their focus was divided. They kept a close eye on Green, watching for any signs of duplicity. At the same time, they made plans to secure their work independently, just in case. Malik knew that the stakes were higher than ever. They had made a name for themselves, and now, they had enemies in high places. People who would stop at nothing to see them fail, or worse, take credit for their discoveries. In the world of science, Malik was learning, there were no guarantees. Success didn't just come from hard work, it came from knowing who to trust, and who to watch out for. And right now, there were more questions than answers. The next few days were a blur of careful observation and quiet investigation. Malik and Dr. Reyes, both anxious and determined, had started looking at everything with a more skeptical eye. What had begun as an exciting collaboration now felt like a tangled web of lies and secrets, each thread pulling them deeper into uncertainty. It was as if the ground beneath their feet had shifted, and they were unsure whether they were walking forward, or falling. Malik found himself unable to shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The sense of unease that had lingered since his conversation with Professor Green had only grown stronger. He spent sleepless nights poring over their research, trying to focus on the work that had gotten them this far, but every time he looked at his notes, he couldn't help but feel that there were pieces of the puzzle missing. One evening, after a particularly tense meeting with Green, Malik decided to take matters into his own hands. He wasn't just going to wait around and hope that things would magically sort themselves out. It was time to dig deeper, far deeper, into the situation, and he needed Dr. Reyes by his side. They met late that night in their shared office, the low hum of their computers the only sound that filled the room. "Reyes," Malik began, his voice low but urgent, "I can't keep ignoring this. I've been doing some digging on Green, and something doesn't add up." Dr. Reyes leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms as she looked at him. "What have you found?" "I've been tracing her connections. The people she's worked with. I did some background research on her team and came across a few red flags," Malik said, his fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Green's been involved in some very lucrative private sector collaborations, companies that deal with government contracts and defense. You know the type of work we're doing now. Quantum computing. The military-industrial complex is all over that." Dr. Reyes frowned. "So you think Green's been using us to advance her own agenda?" Malik nodded. "I think she's been playing both sides. On one hand, she's working with us, presenting herself as an ally. But on the other, she's tied up in projects that could exploit our research for military or corporate gain. She's protecting something. And it's not just our discoveries, it's something bigger." Dr. Reyes looked at Malik for a long moment, her brow furrowing in thought. She had been skeptical of Green from the beginning, but now it seemed the situation was even worse than she had anticipated. "We need to be careful," Dr. Reyes said finally. "If what you're saying is true, we could be in deeper than we realize. If Green's playing a double game, then she's dangerous. But we don't know enough yet to confront her directly." Malik sat up straighter, his mind racing. "I know. But we can't just sit back and wait for her to make a move. I think we need to find a way to access more information. We need to understand who she's really working for, and what her true intentions are." The next morning, they decided to put their plan into action. Their first step was to dig into Green's research connections. Malik had access to a network of academic databases and was able to gather a list of publications and collaborations Green had been involved in over the years. What he found shocked him. There were papers linked to government-funded projects, classified contracts, and research that had been redirected into the private sector. Some of these papers were not publicly available, raising more suspicions about the true nature of Green's work. "There's no way she's just a well-meaning scientist," Malik muttered, scanning the documents. "These are high-level projects. The kind that have military applications. And I bet they're all tied back to our work." Dr. Reyes nodded gravely. "We need to take this to the next level. We can't trust anyone in this web unless we're sure who's behind it. But there's only one way to get real answers." The answer came in the form of an anonymous tip. Late one night, Malik received a strange email. The subject line was simple but chilling: "I know what Green is really up to." The email was from an unknown address with no name attached, and the message was short, but the content was enough to make Malik's blood run cold. From unknown. Subject: "I know what Green is really up to. Malik. I know you're starting to get suspicious about Professor Green. You should be. Her so-called collaboration with you and Dr. Reyes is a cover for something much bigger. You've probably noticed the projects she's been involved in with defense contractors. But that's not the worst of it. She's part of a network that's interested in using your breakthrough to develop advanced military technology. They want to weaponize what you're working on. I'm giving you this warning because I don't want to see you fall into their hands. Be careful who you trust." Malik stared at the screen, his heart pounding. The email wasn't just a vague accusation, it was a direct warning. Someone knew exactly what was going on. Someone who had insider information. That's it, Malik said, a grim determination settling in his chest. We need to confront Green. We can't afford to keep playing this game. But we need proof. Something concrete that we can use to show the world who she really is. Malik and Dr. Reyes spent the next few days preparing. They knew that if they confronted Green without the proper evidence, it could backfire. They couldn't afford to make a mistake, not when so much was at stake. They began reaching out to contacts within the academic and scientific communities, people who might have information about Green's activities. They also started digging into her financial backers and the corporations she had ties to. It wasn't easy, Green's connections were deep, and the further they dug, the more tangled the web became. Then, one afternoon, Dr. Reyes received an unexpected call from an old colleague, Dr. Lucas Hartman, a physicist who had worked closely with Green years before. Reyes, I heard you've been working with Green, Dr. Hartman said over the phone, his voice low. Listen, I don't know how much you know, but you need to be careful. She's dangerous. And I'm not talking about the work itself, she's involved with people who want to control the outcomes. They're not just interested in physics, they're interested in power. They'll stop at nothing to get it. Dr. Reyes's heart sank as she listened to Dr. Hartman's words. It was clear that Green was hiding more than just secrets about their work, she was tangled in something much larger, something that could have dangerous consequences. I knew there was something wrong, Dr. Reyes whispered, looking over at Malik. We're not just dealing with a scientist anymore. We're dealing with a machine that's set to control the future. As they hung up, the weight of their situation became even more apparent. There was no turning back now. They had to confront Green, and expose the truth, no matter what it cost. The atmosphere in the lab was tense, as if the very air was charged with anticipation. Malik and Dr. Reyes had prepared for this moment for days, carefully gathering the evidence and pieces of the puzzle that would finally expose Professor Green's hidden agenda. But as they stood outside her office, ready to confront her, both of them could feel the weight of what was about to unfold. We can't turn back now, Malik said, his voice low but steady. Whatever happens, we have to push forward. Dr. Reyes nodded, her eyes filled with determination. She knew this was the only way. If Green was as dangerous as they suspected, they needed to put an end to the secrecy and deceit before it was too late. The door to Green's office was slightly ajar, and the low hum of her computer could be heard from within. Malik and Dr. Reyes exchanged a glance before pushing it open, stepping inside. Professor Green was sitting at her desk, flipping through a stack of papers. She looked up when they entered, her face immediately shifting from neutral to a guarded expression. Malik, Dr. Reyes, she said, her voice calm but cool. I was wondering when you two would decide to confront me. Please, have a seat. There was no invitation in her words, only the sense that she was fully aware of their intentions. Malik and Dr. Reyes remained standing, their eyes locked onto hers. This was no longer a meeting for pleasantries, it was a reckoning. Professor Green, Malik began, his voice sharp, we need to talk. And it's time you stopped hiding the truth from us. Green didn't flinch. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, crossing her arms. Truth, she said, her tone laced with a touch of amusement. You two are a lot more perceptive than I gave you credit for. But I'm not surprised. You've been digging into my past, haven't you? Dr. Reyes spoke next, her voice colder than usual. We've been digging into your collaborations, your ties to defense contractors, and the military-industrial complex. You've been using us, Green, using our research to line your pockets and advance an agenda that has nothing to do with scientific progress. This isn't just about physics anymore, is it? It's about power. Green's face remained calm, but her eyes flickered with something dangerous. You're right about one thing, she said, her voice lowering. This isn't just about physics. It never was. Malik's stomach tightened. What does that mean? Who are you really working for? Green paused for a moment, her fingers drumming on the desk as if weighing her words. I'm working for the future, Malik. The future of humanity. You've always believed that science exists for the greater good, haven't you? But let me tell you something, science, as we know it, is a tool. And tools can be used by anyone, for anything. The question is, who controls the tool? Dr. Reyes stepped forward, her anger palpable. You're manipulating our work to create weapons. You've been collaborating with people who want to control the very fabric of our discoveries. And you knew from the start that we'd be a means to an end. Green stood up, her expression hardening. You've both underestimated me. I didn't just recruit you for your knowledge of physics. I recruited you for your potential to shape the future. Your discoveries, Malik, Dr. Reyes, they're revolutionary. But the world isn't ready for them. Not yet. Not in the way you envision. Malik felt a surge of frustration. It was like speaking to a wall. Green was calm, collected, and utterly unrepentant. She wasn't concerned with their moral outrage, she was focused on something else entirely. Then what exactly are you planning? Malik demanded. You've got military contracts, defense industry ties. Are you going to use our work to develop weapons of mass destruction? To control the world? Green's eyes gleamed with a cold, calculating glint. No, Malik. I'm not here to build weapons. Not exactly. But I am here to ensure that humanity can survive the future. Global instability, climate change, the erosion of democracy, these are real threats. If we don't act now, we'll all be left behind. Her words sounded rehearsed, like she had given them to herself many times before. But Malik wasn't buying it. There was something darker lurking beneath her grand ideas. He could see it now, the ambition, the obsession with control. You're not saving humanity, Malik spat. You're using it. You're using people like me, like Dr. Reyes, to create something that could tear the world apart. Green's eyes narrowed. You're too idealistic, Malik. The world isn't a playground for noble intentions. It's a battlefield. If you can't accept that, then you're not seeing the big picture. The conversation was spiraling, and Malik could feel the tension mounting. But there was one thing that still didn't sit right with him, the email. The anonymous warning had hinted at something more sinister, something Green hadn't fully revealed. What about the people you're working with? Malik asked, his voice a little quieter now. Who are they? Who else is involved in this plan of yours? Green's expression shifted for the briefest of moments, just enough for Malik to notice. She had a flicker of hesitation in her eyes, but it was quickly masked. She knew the jig was up. They're not important, Green replied, trying to regain control of the conversation. What matters is the work we're doing. The potential we have to shape the future. No, Dr. Reyes cut in sharply. The people behind you are just as important as the work itself. And I think you know that we're not going to back down until we have answers. You can't hide this forever. For a moment, Green said nothing. Her eyes darted to the window, and Malik could almost see her mind racing. She was calculating her next move. But then, she exhaled deeply, as if resigning herself to something she knew was inevitable. I've played this game for a long time, Green said, her voice taking on a darker tone. I knew this moment would come. But you're making a mistake, both of you. This isn't about greed or power. It's about survival. When the world crumbles, only those who have control over the future will have any hope of rebuilding. Malik and Dr. Reyes exchanged a look. They had heard enough. Green wasn't going to give them the answers they needed. She was too deep in her own delusion to see the truth. But that didn't matter now. What mattered was what they would do next. We're done here, Malik said, his voice hardening. You've made your choices, Green. And now we'll make ours. We're going to take our work and expose everything. The world needs to know what you're really up to." Green's face twisted into a cold smile. "You think you can stop me? You think you can take me down? You have no idea what you're up against." But as Malik and Dr. Reyes turned to leave, the tension in the air was thick with the realization that this was just the beginning. They had confronted Green, but they had no idea how far-reaching her influence truly was. And now, they were fully in the crosshairs. The days following their confrontation with Professor Green were a whirlwind. Malik and Dr. Reyes had set their minds on exposing the truth, no matter the cost. Armed with the evidence they had gathered, they were preparing to go public, to tell the world what Green was really involved in, and how the groundbreaking research they had worked so tirelessly on was being hijacked for dark purposes. But the deeper they went, the more they realized that their fight wasn't just against Green, it was against an entire system that had been carefully constructed to keep them silent. Malik sat at his desk late one night, scanning through the piles of documents they had gathered. His eyes were bloodshot from lack of sleep, but the weight of their mission pushed him forward. He couldn't afford to rest. Green's influence was vast, and the longer they waited, the more damage she could cause. Dr. Reyes stood by the window, looking out over the city. Her face was drawn, tired, but there was an unspoken resolve in her expression. She hadn't said much since their last meeting with Green, but Malik could tell she was thinking about everything, about the stakes, the consequences. "We can't keep doing this forever," Malik said, breaking the silence. "We need to move quickly. The evidence we have, it's damning. If we release it to the public, it'll expose everything. But it needs to be in the right hands." Dr. Reyes turned, her brow furrowing. "The right hands," she repeated. "Who do we trust? Even the people we've reached out to, the ones who are supposed to help, they're all tied to Green or the military-industrial complex. Every lead we've followed has led us to a dead end. It's like there's a wall around the truth." Malik sighed, rubbing his temples. "I know. But we can't just stop now. I'm not letting Green win. Not after everything we've learned. We've got to find a way to get this to the right people, people who can't be bought off." Dr. Reyes paced for a moment, her mind working in overdrive. "We need someone from the inside. Someone who can bring the weight of public pressure down on Green. The media, the government, they're all in her pocket. But there are still people outside of that system who might be able to help. I'm thinking about your old professor, Dr. Hartman." Malik raised an eyebrow. "Dr. Hartman? He's the one who warned us about Green, but he's also been keeping his distance. He's not exactly eager to get involved. But he might be our only shot," Dr. Reyes said, her voice urgent. "If he has connections to the right people, people who aren't afraid of Green's power, then maybe we can start making some real progress." The next morning, Malik and Dr. Reyes reached out to Dr. Hartman. They didn't know if he would respond. His previous warnings had made it clear he was cautious, possibly even scared. But there was no turning back now. To their surprise, Dr. Hartman replied almost immediately. From Dr. Lucas Hartman. Subject: We need to talk. Malik, Dr. Reyes. I've been following your progress closely, and I know you're in deep. Green is dangerous, and I didn't want to drag you further into this, but it seems we don't have a choice anymore. Meet me at the usual spot at 6 p.m. tonight. I'll tell you everything you need to know. Be careful. You're being watched. The email was a mix of hope and danger. Hartman had finally agreed to meet with them, but the fact that he'd warned them they were being watched only heightened their sense of urgency. That evening, Malik and Dr. Reyes arrived at the coffee shop where they had met Dr. Hartman several times in the past. It was a quiet, unassuming place, a perfect location for clandestine meetings. But tonight, the air felt different. There was a sense of tension hanging in the room, like something just beyond their reach was waiting to explode. Dr. Hartman was already sitting at a corner table, looking around nervously. His once confident demeanor had been replaced by a wary caution. He looked up when Malik and Dr. Reyes approached. "I'm glad you made it," he said, his voice hushed. "But we don't have much time. They're already on to you." Malik and Dr. Reyes sat down, the weight of the situation pressing down on them. "What do you mean?" Malik asked. "Who's on to us?" Dr. Hartman glanced around again, then leaned in closer. "I've been digging around on my end, trying to find out what Green's really up to. And I've uncovered something much worse than I thought. She's been in contact with some very dangerous people. The kind of people who can make anyone disappear without a trace." Dr. Reyes's face paled. "Disappear? You mean?" "I mean, you two are at risk," Hartman interrupted, his voice growing more intense. "Green isn't just after your research, she's after your silence. If you go public with what you know, she'll make sure you're gone. Permanently." Malik clenched his fists, but it was Dr. Reyes who spoke, her voice steady. "What exactly are we dealing with, Hartman? Who is she working with?" Hartman's face twisted with frustration. "I don't know all the details yet, but I've been able to confirm that Green's collaborators are far more powerful than you realize. They have deep ties in the government, private defense contractors, and intelligence agencies. They've been manipulating the very systems you're trying to expose." Malik leaned in. "So, what do we do now? We can't just sit back and let her win. She's already ruined everything we've worked for." "You can't fight her directly," Hartman said, his voice low and urgent. "You need to go underground. I'll help you get in touch with some people who can protect you. But you need to lay low for now. The longer you stay in the spotlight, the more dangerous it gets." Dr. Reyes shook her head. "You're telling us to run. We can't just disappear. We have to take down Green." Hartman sighed, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and regret. "I know you want to stop her. But this isn't just about her anymore. This is about the people she's working with, the ones who'll stop at nothing to get what they want. You have no idea how far they'll go." As they left the coffee shop, Malik and Dr. Reyes were struck by the gravity of Hartman's words. It was no longer just about exposing Green. It was about surviving long enough to even have the chance to do so. The truth had become a double-edged sword. Exposing it might free the world, but it could also cost them everything. The city skyline shimmered in the distance as Malik and Dr. Reyes made their way through the back alleys, the shadows of the night providing only a semblance of protection. The weight of their situation pressed down on them like a suffocating fog. Since their meeting with Dr. Hartman, the truth had become even clearer, and more terrifying. Green wasn't just working for the future of humanity, she was working for a future she controlled, one where power and secrecy were the currency, and lives were disposable. But it wasn't just Green they had to worry about anymore. The web of influence that stretched behind her was far-reaching, and they had become entangled in it. People who could erase them from existence with a single call were closing in. It wasn't enough to expose the truth anymore. They had to survive first. "This is crazy," Malik muttered, glancing over his shoulder as they ducked into a narrow, dimly lit street. "We should have gone public the moment we got the evidence. At least then we'd be on the offensive." Dr. Reyes shook her head, her expression tense. "You don't understand, Malik. If we had gone public before Hartman contacted us, we'd be dead by now. These people, they don't play by the rules. You're thinking like a scientist. But out here, it's all about power, manipulation, and control." Malik clenched his fists. He knew she was right, but the reality of their situation still felt surreal. He had spent his whole life working towards something that could change the world, he'd never imagined it would be so dangerous. And now, it wasn't just about proving his theory anymore. It was about staying alive long enough to see it through. The streets felt emptier than usual, like the city itself was holding its breath. They had to be careful. They didn't know who was watching. Every corner, every shadow, seemed like a potential threat. After several hours of winding through the city, Malik and Dr. Reyes arrived at a rundown apartment building in a neighborhood that looked like it hadn't seen a makeover in decades. The place was far removed from the shiny tech hubs and corporate districts where they once felt like they belonged. This was a world of anonymity, where no one asked questions. They made their way up to the third floor, where an unmarked door stood at the end of the hall. Dr. Reyes knocked twice, waited, and then knocked once more. A moment later, the door creaked open, revealing a tall, scruffy man with a wary look in his eyes. "You two really made it," the man said, stepping aside to let them in. His voice was low and gravelly. "Not many people get past the people watching your backs. But I guess you're the exception." Malik glanced around, his eyes quickly scanning the small, cluttered apartment. The room was filled with electronics, computers, wires, screens flashing with cryptic data. But despite the advanced tech, there was a sense of controlled chaos to it all, like they were in a place that had seen too much and was trying to keep it all hidden. "This is Alex," Dr. Reyes explained, introducing him to Malik. "He's the one who reached out to me a few weeks ago. He has a few contacts who can help us. People on the inside. People who aren't afraid of green." Alex motioned for them to sit at the makeshift table in the center of the room. "We don't have much time," he said. "There's a lot I can do, but you need to be prepared for what comes next. You're not just fighting green anymore. You're fighting an entire system that's been in place for decades." Malik sat down, the gravity of Alex's words sinking in. "I thought green was just the tip of the iceberg. But I didn't realize how deep it went." Alex's eyes hardened. "Green's just a cog in the machine. A powerful cog, but a cog nonetheless. The people she's working with, they're the real threat. You have no idea how deep the corruption runs. They'll stop at nothing to protect their interests." Dr. Reyes leaned forward, her voice tight with urgency. "We need access to everything. All of Green's communications, the contracts, the military ties, everything. We need it to bring her down, and we need it fast." Alex rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You're asking for a lot. But I've got people in high places, people who are willing to help. The problem is, we need to act quickly. Green's going to make her move soon, and if you're still here when she does, you won't make it out." Malik's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean by that? What exactly is she planning?" "I don't know everything," Alex said, his voice dropping lower, "but I do know this: there's a big meeting coming up. The kind that decides the future of your work. It's scheduled for the end of the month, and Green's been making moves behind the scenes to make sure she's in control of the narrative. If you want to stop her, you'll have to do it before then." The information hit Malik like a punch to the gut. The thought of Green cementing her control over their research was enough to make his blood run cold. But the idea of going head-to-head with the forces backing her, forces with resources and power beyond anything he could imagine, was terrifying. "What's our next move?" Dr. Reyes asked, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside. Alex's fingers flew over a nearby keyboard, bringing up a map of the city. He zoomed in on a location marked with a red dot. "Here," he said. "This is the building where the meeting's set to take place. It's a high-security facility, but I've got someone who can get you inside. You'll need to be quick, and you'll need to be smart. If you get caught, Green won't just erase you, she'll make sure your names are never spoken again." Malik took a deep breath. "We don't have much time. We'll go after the meeting, get the intel, and expose everything. We have to act before she finishes what she started." Alex looked at both of them, his face serious. "You sure about this? Once you go in, there's no turning back." Dr. Reyes nodded. "We're sure." As they prepared to leave, Malik couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap. But there was no other choice. They had to confront Green and her powerful backers. If they didn't, they would lose everything they had fought for, and possibly their lives. With their mind set, Malik and Dr. Reyes followed Alex's directions, stepping into a world that had once seemed like a distant fantasy. But now, it was all too real. The darkness was closing in, and there was no escaping it. The night before the operation, Malik and Dr. Reyes couldn't sleep. They had spent hours meticulously going over every detail of their plan, but no amount of preparation could shake the feeling that something was off. They were about to walk into a fortress, and though they had Alex's help, the stakes had never been higher. Failure was not an option. As they lay in the cramped room of the apartment, the hum of the city outside provided little comfort. The soft glow of the lone lamp flickered in the corner, casting long shadows on the walls. Malik sat at the small table, running his fingers through the pages of the plans Alex had provided. The map of the facility was clear, but it also felt like a maze, with dead ends and hidden corridors. He could almost feel Green's eyes on them, waiting for them to make a mistake. Dr. Reyes, on the other hand, was pacing back and forth, her mind clearly working through every possible contingency. We're going to need more than just the evidence. We need to be sure we can make it out alive. Malik glanced up at her. We will. We've been through worse. You know that. She nodded, but there was doubt in her eyes. I'm not worried about getting caught. I'm worried about what happens once we have the evidence. Once Green knows we have what she's been hiding, everything she's worked for will be on the line. Malik leaned back in his chair. We're not just doing this for ourselves anymore. We're doing this for every person whose life she's destroyed, every system she's manipulated. If we back down now, she wins. The next morning, they set out before the sun had risen. The city felt eerily quiet, the streets bathed in an early morning fog. Alex had arranged for a contact of his to meet them outside the facility, a former security expert who had worked there for years. This was their way in, a back door that no one else knew about. As they approached the facility, the enormity of the task ahead hit Malik. The building loomed over them, a cold, imposing structure with walls of steel and reinforced glass. There were armed guards stationed outside, patrolling the perimeter. The security system was state-of-the-art, designed to stop anyone from getting in, let alone a couple of former university professors and a rogue tech expert. Malik felt his heart rate pick up as they entered the alley behind the building. His eyes darted around, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The contact was waiting for them, hidden in the shadows, a man dressed in black with a hood covering most of his face. You're late, the man said in a low voice. Let's move. Dr. Reyes gave him a quick nod, and they followed him through the alley, staying close to the walls. Every step felt like an eternity. The air was thick with tension, and Malik couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching them. His instincts were on high alert. The contact led them to a small service entrance, where a security camera was positioned above the door. But the man had already disabled it, and the door was unlocked. It creaked open, and they slipped inside. Inside, the facility was nothing like they had imagined. The stark, sterile hallways were lined with doors leading to various rooms, some marked with numbers, others with official-looking labels. The humming of machines filled the air, sophisticated equipment that Malik had never seen before, not in the university lab or even in any top-tier research facility. This way, the contact whispered. He moved with purpose, his steps quick and deliberate. There's a lab up ahead. It's where the meeting is supposed to take place. You'll have to move fast. Malik and Dr. Reyes exchanged a look. They had known the risks, but now that they were inside, the reality of the situation was far more nerve-wracking than they'd expected. There were no guards in sight, but the atmosphere felt charged, like the calm before a storm. They were getting closer to Green, and to the truth. They moved down the hallway, following the contact's lead, until they reached a set of double doors. Behind them, Malik could hear muffled voices, and through the small window on the door, he could see shadows moving inside. The contact gestured to them. This is it. The meeting's just starting. You need to get in there, gather what you can, and get out before they realize you're here. Malik nodded, his pulse racing. How much time do we have? Not long, the contact said. 10 minutes, maybe 15. After that, all hell will break loose. Dr. Reyes turned to Malik. We're in this together. Stay focused. They took a deep breath and pushed open the door. Inside, the room was large and sleek, with a long conference table at the center. Several people were seated around it, all in suits, their faces hidden in shadows. Among them, Malik immediately spotted Green. She was at the head of the table, her icy demeanor unmistakable. She wasn't alone. There were men and women on either side of her, government officials, military contractors, and high-ranking individuals whose names Malik had only ever read about in the news. These were the people who pulled the strings. These were the people who had turned his groundbreaking research into something dark and dangerous. Green's eyes met his, and for a moment, time seemed to slow. She didn't look surprised. In fact, she almost looked pleased. You thought you could expose me? She asked, her voice calm but filled with a chilling certainty. You're too late, Malik. Malik's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't flinch. He had to keep moving. He turned to Dr. Reyes. Get the data. Dr. Reyes immediately moved toward the far end of the room, where a set of servers hummed quietly. She was quick, her fingers flying over the keyboard as she bypassed security protocols. But as she worked, Malik kept his eyes on Green. Something was off. The way she was looking at him, it was almost as if she had been expecting him. Don't waste your time, Green said again. You're already out of your depth. Just then, the door to the room slammed shut behind them, and the lights flickered. Malik's blood ran cold. They were trapped. Get the data, he shouted to Dr. Reyes, his voice urgent. He reached for his phone, ready to call for help, but just as his finger touched the screen, the room filled with armed guards. The security system had been triggered. Move! Malik shouted, but it was too late. Green's men had surrounded them. The room was suffocating. The cold metal walls seemed to close in on Malik and Dr. Reyes as they stood surrounded by Green's guards, their weapons aimed and ready. Green, standing tall at the head of the table, observed them with a cold, calculating gaze. You really thought you could outsmart me? She asked, her voice dripping with disdain. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Malik's heart was pounding in his chest. The guards moved closer, forming an impenetrable circle around them. There was nowhere to run. Nowhere to hide. The data that Dr. Reyes had been trying to extract was still incomplete, and they were on the verge of failure. But as the seconds ticked by, a strange calm washed over Malik. He had come this far. He wasn't going to let Green win, not after everything that had been at stake. Dr. Reyes, still working at the server terminal, didn't seem to notice the growing tension in the room. She kept typing furiously, eyes locked on the screen as the data began to transfer. But even she knew they didn't have much time before the guards took action. You think exposing me will stop anything? Green said, her voice now more menacing. The world has always been controlled by those who have the power to shape the future. What you did, what you've discovered, it's nothing more than a tiny cog in a machine too vast for you to understand. This isn't just about research. This is about survival. My survival. Malik shot Dr. Reyes a quick glance. She nodded, understanding the urgency in his eyes. The clock was ticking, and the walls were closing in. They had to act, now. Without warning, Malik lunged toward one of the guards, knocking him off balance. The sound of the scuffle echoed in the room, and in that split second, Dr. Reyes grabbed a device from the table and threw it at the server. The explosion was small but powerful enough to disrupt the data transfer and cause a surge in the system. The guards immediately opened fire, their bullets ricocheting off the walls. Malik and Dr. Reyes dove to the ground, narrowly avoiding the shots. The room erupted into chaos, the air filled with gunfire and shouting. Go! Get to the door. Dr. Reyes shouted, pulling Malik to his feet. They dashed toward the back of the room, where a security door lay just beyond the chaos. Green's laughter echoed through the room, chilling them both to the core. You think you've won? You have no idea what's coming. But Malik and Dr. Reyes weren't listening anymore. They were focused only on survival. They reached the door and slammed it open, the heavy metal door creaking under pressure. They rushed down the hallway, the sound of their footsteps reverberating in the narrow corridors. Behind them, they could hear the pounding of boots as the guards gave chase. We're almost there, Dr. Reyes said, her breath ragged. There's another exit just ahead. We can't stop now. Malik glanced over his shoulder, his mind racing. He knew they couldn't outrun the guards forever. But there was one thing they still had, the truth. They had the information that Green and her network had been hiding for years. That was their leverage, their weapon. They turned the corner just as a burst of gunfire rang out, narrowly missing them. The end of the hallway loomed ahead, a faint glow of daylight filtering in from the outside. They were close. But then, as if by fate, the hallway forked. They had to make a choice, left or right. Malik's heart raced as he hesitated for a split second. He knew the risks, but they didn't have time for second-guessing. Without thinking, he grabbed Dr. Reyes's arm and pulled her toward the right. They barreled down the hallway, adrenaline pumping through their veins. The guards were getting closer. Malik could hear their shouts, their footsteps pounding in pursuit. But they had no choice. The exit had to be just ahead. The hallway stretched on, the exit seeming farther and farther away. With every step, Malik could feel the weight of their situation. They were being hunted, and the only way out was through. But just as they reached the end of the hallway, a familiar voice called out behind them. Malik's blood froze. Malik, Green said, her voice cool and composed, you've run long enough. It's over. Malik turned, ready to face her, but Dr. Reyes grabbed his arm, pulling him forward. Keep going, she urged, her voice tight with panic. We're not done yet. But it was too late. The hallway was blocked. Guards stood at the other end, their guns raised and aimed directly at them. There was no escape. They were trapped. For a moment, everything seemed to slow down. Malik's thoughts flashed back to everything that had led him to this moment, the long nights spent researching in the lab, the conversations with his father, the endless hours of studying, and the realization that his work could change everything. All of it had been building to this moment where everything hung in the balance. And then, in an instant, everything came together. Do you really think you can stop me? Green said, stepping closer. You have no idea how much power I wield. You're just pawns in a game that's already been won. Malik stood tall, looking her dead in the eye. You're wrong, Green. It's not over. Not yet. With a sudden movement, Malik reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a flash drive, the data they had managed to extract before the system was sabotaged. He held it up in front of him, the small piece of technology gleaming in the harsh light. This, he said, his voice steady, is the key to everything. This is the truth you've been hiding. And no matter what you do, it's going to come out. For a brief moment, Green's eyes flickered with uncertainty. But then, she composed herself, her icy smile returning. You think a flash drive will change anything? You're naive. But Malik didn't flinch. It's not the flash drive that matters. It's what's on it. You can't hide the truth forever. As the guards advanced, Malik and Dr. Reyes backed into the corner, their eyes locked on the looming danger. It was clear now, this wasn't just about science. This was about taking down a system built on lies, corruption, and manipulation. They had come too far to back down now. With one final glance at Dr. Reyes, Malik knew that whatever happened next, they had made a difference. Even if they didn't make it out of this alive, they had exposed the truth. And the world would never be the same. The silence that followed was suffocating. As Malik and Dr. Reyes stood backed into the corner of the hallway, surrounded by Green's armed guards, everything felt like it was moving in slow motion. The truth, in the form of the flash drive Malik held, had been exposed, but at what cost? "Give me the drive," Green ordered, her voice as cold as ever, though there was a flicker of uncertainty behind her eyes. "You know it's useless to resist. You're out of your depth." Malik's fingers tightened around the drive. Despite the tension in the air and the barrel of a gun pointed directly at his chest, something inside him had shifted. He wasn't the frightened scientist he had been when he first entered this battle. He was something more now, a person who had come to understand the power of truth and the consequences of hiding it. "I'm not giving it to you," Malik said, his voice steady, despite the rapid beat of his heart. "You can try to stop me, but it won't work. It's already out there." Green's eyes narrowed, the smile on her lips never quite reaching her eyes. "You really think the truth will save you? You think exposing everything will bring down everything I've built? You're naive, Malik." Dr. Reyes moved slightly closer to Malik, her eyes calculating. They had reached a deadlock, and both knew it. It was clear now that the data they had fought for wasn't just about exposing Green's dark secrets, it was about bringing down the whole system that allowed people like her to control the world's most powerful institutions. That, however, came with its own set of dangers. "Maybe it won't," Dr. Reyes said, her voice low but unwavering. "But it's the beginning. The world needs to know what you've done. What you've been hiding. It's already in motion. You can't stop it now." The guards shifted uncomfortably, some glancing at each other as the tension grew. It wasn't just about an elite tech company or a few corrupt individuals anymore, it was about a global system that was too vast, too ingrained to be shut down so easily. Malik saw his opening. With one fluid motion, he threw the flash drive to Dr. Reyes, who snatched it out of mid-air with the practiced precision they'd come to rely on. Before the guards could react, she slipped it into a small compartment in her jacket, the data safely hidden from view. They had one goal now, survive and make sure the data reached the right people. Green's expression darkened as her hand clenched into a fist. "You'll regret this," she warned, her voice low and filled with venom. "You'll both pay for what you've done. I'll make sure of it." Before either Malik or Dr. Reyes could respond, the room's lights flickered again. The distant sound of sirens echoed through the building. Malik's heart skipped a beat as he realized that help was already on the way, an anonymous tip-off, a network of allies who had been quietly preparing for this moment. They had done their part, but this would be the final push. The door at the end of the hallway burst open, and a group of armed officers from the local government tactical unit poured in, weapons raised. The air seemed to explode with movement as the guards scrambled to adjust to the new threat. Malik and Dr. Reyes didn't waste a second. They darted for the exit, following the officers as they subdued the remaining security. As they reached the street, the bright lights of police vehicles illuminated the darkness, casting long shadows across the pavement. The cold air felt strangely freeing after the suffocating tension they'd just escaped. Dr. Reyes turned to Malik as they moved toward the waiting van. "We did it," she said, breathless but filled with relief. "We actually did it." Malik nodded, though his mind was still racing. They had done it, but the true weight of their actions was just beginning to sink in. The truth would come out, but the aftermath would be just as complicated, if not more. 1 week later. The world was starting to change. News outlets around the globe had exploded with stories of the data Malik and Dr. Reyes had uncovered, proof of widespread corruption, government conspiracies, and the manipulation of science for profit and power. The global reaction had been swift, chaotic, and at times, violent. Protesters filled the streets of major cities, demanding accountability, while politicians scrambled to distance themselves from the individuals implicated in the leaked documents. Green, once untouchable, had been arrested, her empire crumbling in the wake of the scandal. However, her network was vast, and many of her associates were still operating in the shadows, trying to salvage what they could. Malik and Dr. Reyes knew that this was only the beginning. Exposing the corruption was a necessary first step, but dismantling the systems that allowed it to thrive would take years, decades, even. Malik stood outside a small cafe, the morning sun shining on his face. The world was changing, but it wasn't clear yet whether it would be for the better. People had been awoken to the realities of power, but waking up was only the first part of the fight. The real challenge was what came next. As he sipped his coffee, a familiar figure approached him. Dr. Reyes, looking more tired than ever, but with a faint smile on her face. "We did good, Malik," she said, sitting down across from him. "But we're not done." Malik looked up at her, his thoughts still scattered. He had been asking himself that same question for the past week, what now? They had toppled one giant, but there were so many more. Green's network was just a small part of something far bigger, and the forces they had unleashed would not stop with her fall. Dr. Reyes seemed to sense his thoughts. It's not just about exposing people like Green. It's about creating a world where the truth has more power than lies. A world where corruption can't thrive in the dark. Malik smiled faintly. "You're right. It's just, a lot to take in. Sometimes it feels like it's too big to tackle." She chuckled softly. "That's how I felt the first time I tried to change something. But it's always been about the small steps. We start by making people aware. Then we work to change the systems that make it possible for people like Green to exist." Malik's gaze drifted toward the horizon. The world was far from perfect, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of hope. "The fight isn't over, then?" he asked. Dr. Reyes shook her head. "No, Malik. It's just begun." Months passed. The fallout from the leak continued to shake governments, corporations, and individuals who had once thought they were untouchable. Malik and Dr. Reyes became symbols of a new era of accountability, but they remained largely in the background, continuing their work. They knew their role wasn't finished. They had ignited a spark, but it was up to the world to carry the flame. Through it all, Malik remembered what had brought him to this point, a simple desire for truth, for justice, and for a world where science and discovery were used for the betterment of all, not for the benefit of the few. The story of the janitor's son who had solved the problem that stumped Harvard professors had become more than just a tale of brilliance, it had become the beginning of a new movement. And this time, the truth was in their hands. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?